My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Ian Burrows. It's February 7th, 2020. We're here at the Nicholson Library at Linfield College. Ian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
The first question for you, as we start everyone, is why wine?
That's a great question, Rich. I sort of found my way into wine through hospitality. So the question could have been why hospitality, I suppose. My grandparents owned a pub in southeast London. I was born and raised just outside London. And I was always interested in the hospitality side and of business. And I would say that I learned to appreciate I had a healthy respect for alcohol from a very young age, and noticed how it was the pub was a place for people to come and socialise and make friends. That always appealed to me. As I grew and started to think about what my career might be, I gravitated towards food, and so after about 15 years as a chef, apprentice, restaurateur, I decided to move from the back of house into the service side of the hospitality industry. And the creative side of cooking was very enjoyable for me, so I wanted to keep that sort of creativity alive in what I did. Food and wine pairings had been a big part of my career the last few years, especially as a restaurateur, but as a chef. I'd done a lot of food and wine pairings, was lucky enough to work with some really great people along the way who also use that same kind of business model. When I decided to go into the front of house side of the business, I kind of decided that it would be great to start on the sommelier track, on the wine steward. I enjoy collecting wines myself. Enjoyed the business side of things and realized that running a restaurant, there was a large part of the success of a restaurant is through the sales and service of wine.
So as you got into that side, you had a pretty significant hospitality background already. Tell me about learning wine that way versus kind of learning it as a pairing, the formal education.
Coming in it from the business side and not necessarily the winery operational side. We obviously have a sort of a daily reminder of why we drink wine, and that is, well, for me anyway, that is as an accompaniment to food. I think most people in the industry now would agree that wine is, for the most part, better appreciated when it's there as an accompaniment to fine food or any food really. So I realized pretty early on that I appreciated early on that everybody's taste is different. There's no like one great wine. It's very subjective, and being able to keep that in the back of our minds as we're selling, serving, recommending wines is very important. And then as a winemaker, I find that equally important. What I want to do is just a small snapshot of what the possibilities are, and keeping an open mind to that. So a winemaker is always going to end up making wine that appeals to him or her, but a great winemaker will always appreciate the other things, the other possibilities. That makes sense.
Tell me about the formalized process then of becoming certified by the Court of Master Sommeliers. It's a pretty rigorous set of examinations. There are 4 levels to the Court of Master Sommelier examinations.
I graduated through to the advanced. I took that on a couple of occasions. You either pass or you fail. There's no like middle ground there. I took a pretty sort of a speedy course through the court. I really didn't start studying wine until 2005 formally. It was just after I had sold my restaurant in Adelaide in South Australia, and I'd made the conscious decision to move away from the back of house to front of house. I'd been, great story, when I decided I was going to leave Australia, I was going to go back to France. I'd learned to cook in France, so I decided I wanted to go back there to kind of embark on the next sort of career move in wine. And a good friend of mine in the Barossa Valley, who is a well-known winemaker, said to me, "Oh, I hear you're closing down Durham's." I said, "Yep, we're done with that." He's like, "What are you going to do next?" I was like, "I'm going to go into the wine industry." And he's like, "Well, where are you going to work?" I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go back to Paris, but I have no idea where exactly. And he said, "Don't worry about it. I've got a buddy there. You can go and work for him. He's got this little wine bar." So I said, "Well, what's his name?" He said, "Oh, it's Tim Johnson. You probably haven't heard of him." I said, "Oh, no idea who the guy is." So anyway, it was the early parts of the internet, Googling. I Googled him. A couple of articles came up, and he owns a wine bar in Paris called Juveniles. He's been around for about 35, 40 years now, and a great little wine bar. And lo and behold, I landed in Paris, and Dave had already made the call for me to Tim. Had an interview and started immediately with him. I feel like from 2005 onwards, it's been a really wonderful set of events that's just kind of flowed on, that's allowed me to do what I'm currently doing. Kind of taken my hands off of the wheel, as it were, and it's all worked out. But I spent a couple of years with Tim at Juvenile's Wine Bar, doing some buying with him. He'd been doing it long enough to know what he wanted. I got good guidance there. We could call him a mentor, and was not for an extraordinary long period of time, but for a couple of years. And then I was kind of spotted. I was on the restaurant bar floor every night that we were open. That was kind of my main duties, was running the bar for him. And I had a few guests that would come in regularly to see me. We were one of just a handful of like all English speaking bars in Paris. So we had a lot of interesting characters come in there, a lot of industry. I met some really wonderful people from the Georges V Hotel who also helped develop my interest in fine wine, and we went traveling together throughout Europe to some of the great wine regions. But this one chap in particular that would come in eventually offered me a job. So I went off to work for him in another restaurant in Paris that was about 300 years old, a place called Maison La Perouse. I'd actually already worked there as a chef about 7 years before, and so I was returning to the team, but as the person that was holding the keys to the cellar. I was a sommelier. I'm not sure if I would call myself a sommelier at that time, but certainly it was a wonderful experience to hold the keys to a cellar with millions of euros worth of wine, and be the first sort of English speaker on a restaurant floor with such heritage in Paris. So, yeah,
that's pretty incredible. I'm curious what you mentioned the idea that there's no perfect wine. The wine has to. Tell me about learning that process of not just pairing food with wine, but also pairing people with wine, and how you get educated in that realm to feel comfortable making that kind of assessment. It's more instincts, I think. I find it. That's a really great question, Rich, and one that I've not really thought about before. I think it's to do with listening and trying to make a connection outside of wine
with someone. If we were talking about a conversation that you need to have quite quickly in a restaurant service situation, that may be a minute or even less. And to, I think you can learn which questions to ask and listen intently, and more than anything else, I think it's watching tables interact when you're not there. I mean, lone diners are pretty difficult to gauge, although you don't have other distractions of diners on the table when you're asking them about wine and trying to figure out what they would like to drink. But with group situations, a quick sort of 5-minute study of the table, of their interactions, and from the minute they walk through the door, I think a good sommelier is probably watching for cues. But I've been surprised so many times. We can't help but make assessments in our minds that are far from the truth, far from the actual situation that you've got in front of you. I don't want to be too cryptic, but it's very easy to look at the guy that comes in ripped jeans and sneakers and say he's up for a $15 glass of Pinot, when in fact he's about to kind of spend $1,000 on a bottle of Burgundy. Yeah. So I mean, it happens all the time. It's one of those kind of cliches. I think that I think it's a lot of practice. We get a lot of practice in good restaurants. A good sommelier will always work service. I always enjoyed working service, just like I enjoyed working service in the kitchen. I enjoyed working service on the restaurant floor, and I enjoy selling wine now. Like, the people aspect, the human aspect of the business is as important to me, or maybe even more so than the grape aspect. I like hard physical labor, and I like talking to people face to face and understanding what it is they might need. And that's a constant. It goes back to my grandfather's pub, I think. You can make it as complicated as you want, but a glass of wine or a pint of lager and 2 people and a packet of peanuts can be really interesting. It's the conversation, it's the human aspect that's really cool.
So at this point, you've been in Paris to learn to cook, and you've been to Australia to own a restaurant, and then back to Paris. Yep. And now you're working in the front of the house, and you have this cellar. So what happens next at that point?
I was married, and my ex-wife and I were obviously both based in Paris. She was from the US, and she was trying to break in. She had successfully broken into fine dining as a chef after a few years in law, and we decided that we were going to come back to her to come back to the States and me to come with her to be closer to her family, and we were really just fed up with the hustle in Paris. As beautiful as that place is, we were both kind of like, let's go see something else, go see something new. And so we moved back she moved back to the States, moved to California, and we settled in the Bay Area. It was that was in 2008.
And what did you do there?
I started working for a small restaurant that was based in the Russian River Valley, and it was really there that the quartermaster sommelier examinations kind of took my interest. I was working for a master sommelier there, and then opened up a very small winery based in Carneros in Sonoma, and when I was ready to leave there, I was approached by the business partner of Dominique Crène at Atelier Crène in San Francisco, which at that point had really just opened. I think they'd been open about a year. I think they just got their first Michelin star, and they were looking for somebody that they currently had a maitre d'hotel who was looking after the wine list, and they wanted to kind of get somebody in to specialize in that area. They'd quickly realized that to support that very intricate and expensive cuisine that Dominique was developing there. They needed a wine program to go with it, something that was, a fusion. I always say it was a fusion of like the hipster bottlings and the classics. It was, no one that was too kind of dogmatic about any one style of wine. So I apparently fitted that.
So you're basically building a wine program that hasn't really existed before, building it more or less from the ground up.
Yeah, it was nascent. Yeah, they had originally tried to craft a pretty interesting beverage program. They didn't have a full liquor license, so they couldn't serve hard liquor, spirits. But they were developing this, and kudos to the guy that did it, but I couldn't continue it. It was very labor intensive, but it was basically a cocktail program based on wines, lightly fortified wines, vermouths and things like that. And it worked quite well, but I think it perhaps was a little bit avant-garde for the early stages of the restaurant. So yeah, I was basically tasked with, I was given white card, basically, carte blanche, just, it was a month-to-month situation. I would work a month, look at my figures, see what's sold, basically chat with Michelle, who was the business partner, and Dominique, see how happy or unhappy they were with the progress, and we would just go like that. So that went on for about 2.5 years. And I think we did a pretty good job. We gained our second Michelin star, and we were gunning for a third Michelin star when I left, and they got their third star, and now it's a small empire.
You were on the ground floor of that.
Yeah. It was exciting times. Long hours, used to that. Coming from the kitchen, and I'd worked long hours in Paris. So yeah, it was good. It was good, exciting, scrappy, as I'd like to say. It was everything you would expect from a great little restaurant.
I'm curious with the carte blanche. That's kind of a double-edged sword, because not only are you're given all this freedom, but you're also you don't really have a lot of restrictions or guidelines either. So if you're picking basically any wine you want, how did you go about selecting a program?
Well, I was lucky enough when I was working in Russian River. And I had very short amount of time. I did some work experience with Michael Mina restaurant when Raj was still in kind of in charge of the wine program for Michael Mina restaurants. And so between the guys that he had working for him, that I was working with alongside, and in Russian River, it was only a short amount of time, but it was very immersive, and I kind of got a feel for what people were willing to pay for and what they wanted to drink with perhaps less adventurous cuisine, a little more commercial in style, a little more classic. But so that was the most challenging thing for me. I think was not really picking the wines that I knew would sell, but choose very. It was always a battle to find wines that would go with a cuisine that I was most everyone on the planet is unfamiliar with. As we know, Dominique's cuisine now, there are more and more people doing that. It's vegetable and herb based, and lots of broths. It's both light in texture but very, very intense in flavor and aromatic. So it's very clever food, and very small portions. So substantial wines, big, heavy, rich wines, don't always work. Certainly, you can be excused for putting 1 or 2 in a lineup of 20 during a meal, but you certainly don't want a one heavy, high alcohol wine after another in that kind of scenario. So that's. I'm a risk taker. There's no doubt about it. I love a challenge. I'm not afraid to make mistakes, and I think a lot of that time on the restaurant floor and in the cellars at Atelier Crène reinforced those kind of philosophies for me. Is that it's okay to not get it right all the time, as long as you can admit that. and think fast and think on your feet, and if somebody, it happened a lot that people would get wines that they didn't think were great with those dishes, or they just didn't enjoy as a wine, and being able to be flexible is important. And I think that's a chef is very important. A cook is very flexible. I mean, that's important in their day-to-day work. So I think all of that leads up. And now as a winemaker, you need to be flexible. You really don't know what you're going to get. What is the chemical composition of the grape or grapes that come in the winery until they land. I mean, you have a little bit of an idea, a week out, but you're pretty much going on faith that everything is going to be a little bit similar than the previous year. And I've only now done it for 5 years, so it's still very fresh for me. It's a cliche. We're always learning, but I really am. It's the most challenging part of the work now is trying to get out of my own way. Really, it's partial instincts, working on instincts, and being able to say, this is the philosophy I have. This is how I would like to design the wines, manufacture. You're moving grapes, you're crushing them, you're watching over them while they ferment, whether or not one puts chemicals and cultured yeasts and sulfur dioxide or whatever into the wine is really neither here nor there. You're doing something. You're manufacturing the wine. You're moving it from tank to barrel to bottle and whatever processes you use in between. So it's being handled, and it's really important to remember that as little as you want to do, you still need to do something. It's an agricultural product that is manufactured into a beverage. That is how I look at wine. And then there are many, many layers after that. But having a healthy understanding, healthy respect for what the category of beverage is important.
Absolutely. So before we get into that, the winemaking aspect, which I'm curious to dive into, one more question about your work, sommelier in general, not just necessarily in San Francisco, but any of the times when you were selecting wines, were there particular finds you're proud of? Were there wines you found, discovered for yourself that you were particularly proud of along the way? Or winemakers?
I don't think I've ever, to be honest, found a wine that I haven't already, heard about, read about. Like I've drank wines and thought, yeah, that's amazing. That's a category that I hope will develop. But I've definitely not been the first. Like I read reviews. I read reviews. I've always been. I always felt that it's really important to listen to our peers who have more experience. So, for me, previous mentors in the wine industry, Tim, Raj, and his team for a little bit, and then Jeff Kruth at the Farmhouse Inn. I've always been. That's to name a few. Reviewers as well, the British classic wine reviewers who have been around for 20, 30 years. I read them a lot. So I would say that I've never come across a wine that I haven't already heard about or read about. But yeah, I would say in 2006, when I was working in Paris at Juveniles, we would take trips to Beaujolais. to see the producers that are now very famous here in the US, the Kermit Lynch boys that he imports, and they were already well known and well regarded, and they had been pushing against the tide of mechanization and over farming and overproduction of Beaujolais. And I remember when I tasted in their cellars thinking, one day these guys will be recognized for what they're doing, and these wines will be worth a lot more than what they are currently. And here we are, 10 years, almost 15 years later, and yeah, lo and behold, that's happened. But I mean, one of hundreds and hundreds of sommeliers that were probably saying the same thing at that time. Every time we taste a wine that is perceived as great value, we wonder why it's not more popular and why the price hasn't risen. And it's disappointing to think this crosses our mind, but it's like, I hope no one else hears about this, right? So, we hope that these wines will always be $20 a bottle, but inevitably, word gets out. And with social media, the internet now, it's very hard to keep a secret. Everybody wants, like you asked me, are there special finds? Everybody wants to be the first person to find the great value, the new wine, and then suddenly it's no longer a secret, and it's in the supply and demand shifts. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Like when the band you love blows up, right? There's a little piece of you that you lose.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. We'll have our kind of, our little kind of secret interests in things, but yeah, I agree. It's just like any other industry, including music.
So, tell me how you got to Oregon. That's the one thing we haven't gotten to yet. How did you get here?
Well, I was kind of honestly fed up of the restaurant industry. I had almost 15 years as a chef and a restaurateur, and then about another 5 years as a sommelier, as a front of house in some capacity or another. And I was really kind of looking forward to taking a night off. It's very enjoyable, but thinking about family and just forming a relationship where it's not based on kissing someone goodbye in the morning and not seeing them again until the next morning is tough. And so, I was just looking for just a very small change of pace. I mean, I'm running a couple of businesses now, and things don't seem to change that much. But at least, I'm not. I'm on my own schedule, or to a certain extent. So, so that was really what I wanted to do, is just remove myself from restaurant work. And I had met a winemaker and winery owner through the work that I was doing at Atelier Cren in San Francisco, and she offered me a job basically as there were 4 people in the winery, and I was one of those 4. So it's more or less sales. It was both sales to consumers that were visiting the winery, but also doing some market visits in the US and trying to develop some new markets in other parts of the world for her. So I came up originally to help with that. It's a very well-known winery, and after a few months decided that what we were doing there I could do for myself and be a little more independent. So I started my brokerage company, basically, and I saw a niche in the market. We spoke often at that winery about how the buyers, the sommeliers, for the most part, but a few retailers as well in the Portland area and in Oregon in general, were spoilt for choice for Oregon wines. Obviously, we had at that time probably 700 or 800 very good wineries set up in the valley. And some of those were producing a couple of different brands as well. So, it doesn't take long. You've got a lot of choice of Pinot Noir in particular. And I realized that Oregon wineries weren't really getting the love that they deserved locally. A lot of people were coming to me and asking, what they were doing wrong. Are you seeing the same problem here? And so, I mean, it's a small, close-knit community, and I quickly realized that there was a niche for a brokerage company that specifically took care of the local small family wineries. Perhaps they had 2 or 3 distributors throughout the US, and they really wanted to kind of sell more wine in the state. And so that's how Consoleon was born, the brokerage company. So we're a brokerage and distribution company, and I basically do everything myself. I do sales, warehousing, logistics, transfers from wineries, invoicing, deliveries, you name it. So I have about 100 accounts in Oregon, mainly in the Portland metro area, the Willamette Valley, Eugene, Salem, and Bend, and then a few out on the coast as well. But it's I'm on the road a lot. I'm selling a bunch of wine for other people, delicious, good value. I really don't like to use this word, but artisanally made, true handcrafted wines, and authentic, and that's it really. That's the wines need to be honest and well made, delicious, with more or less minimal handling. So.
When you started Consoleon, did you have a goal in the beginning, like an overall goal, and have you achieved it, or have you changed your goal, or?
It hasn't changed so much. I always wanted to be small. I wanted to work for myself. I did not want to have to manage a large group of people. I mean, it's already quite a challenge to manage the logistics of 10 or 12 wineries. Portfolios and getting those out to the right people to taste them and buy them. So an added layer of personnel was not appealing to me. And so I've always tried to avoid that. And I had somebody work for me for a very short period of time as a kind of a sub-broker for me. But, it's tough work. You're out there pounding the pavements for 8 to 10 hours a day, and then processing orders and chasing up on people. So that didn't really work out, and I'm not really surprised. You've got to be very committed to it. As a way of making a living, wine sales is probably not the most glamorous. And so to go back to your question, I've pretty much kept everything as I envisaged it from the start. Simple business model, take care of the people that are taking care of you, and that I kind of feel like I'm piggy in the middle. I have 2 very, very different sets of clients on either side of me. The clients, which are the wineries, who are entrusting us with their product and the placements of their product, the marketing. And then on the other side, the restaurateurs, sommeliers, retail specialist retailers who are entrusting us with bringing them the right wines to taste and select from, and not wasting their time, and supporting them as well. A lot of the budget that I have in Consoleon is about supporting those people. So if there are wine dinners, or the retailers are bringing in these weird and wonderful things from South Africa, I'll go and buy those wines and use those for research and development. And I think it's important to budget the support of the people that are supporting you, and that leads to some really interesting professional relationships that have grown into collaborations now. So we're a small portfolio. Always wanted to be a small portfolio. That is less than 15 producers. I currently have 11, 12. Do you find that clients are coming to you, or that you're seeking out specific people who you think would be interesting? It's a mixture. It's about a 50-50 split. So if we have 2 to 3 year kind of work schedule with people. I often find that I often say that if Consoleon's done its job properly, people should be looking for larger distributors within a couple of years. I can only cover so much ground. I can only sell so much wine. We're not trying to sell a large volume of wine, as silly as that sounds. We're not trying to dump pallets of wine into supermarkets that will remain unnamed. It works for some brands, not for the people that we're working for. And so I imagine, as I'm in this position as a winery as well, I'm honestly looking for larger distribution. Maybe not in Oregon, but people that can do it more efficiently and in other states. So yeah, I've had people approach me. We have a mixture of people that I will and won't take on for various reasons. Like I'm not there as I'm there as a brand ambassador. I'm not there to help develop a brand. So I think that the people we are attracted to work with they already have their brand established mentally. And all they really need is to get that in front of the right people to buy it, because there are a lot of people that think that I think the easiest part of the wine industry is actually making it. That's not to say that winemakers don't work really hard, and it's a constant battle to hone skills, and obviously, but sales is very unrewarding at times. It's the most unromantic part of the business, and so if you have a good story that is authentic, and you have a good product, then you are well on your way to success in sales, and then that's where companies like Consoleon can step in and really get it out there. But there are a lot of people that are making delicious wines, and have forgotten about the value part of it and the story. We're in an age where it's just not good enough to make delicious wine anymore. It's very unfortunate. Some wine drinking cultures are perhaps different from what we see in the US. In my experience, I think a lot of the more classic growing and market regions of Europe probably put less emphasis on the story, or on being different and hip, and more on what's in the bottle. And I think that's healthy. A healthy respect of what's going on in the bottle is probably way more important than if somebody wears a certain brand of clothes or drinks a certain beer during harvest or whatever. But it's all part of it. Our drinkers are very much engaged in brands, and that's fine. That's the world we live in, and that's what we need to do to keep up.
What are the stories that you find resonate with when you're trying to sell wine? What stories are there that are the easiest to sell, or that make the most success? That's
a really great question, and something I have pondered, and it's hard, because why are we thinking about it? We don't want to. So authenticity is just really important, and so that can take a lot of different. That can come from a lot of different angles, right? And I think the wine consumer that we really want to capture, it's a large segment of the wine drinking population of, say, the Pacific Northwest. They can smell a rat a mile off. So be just telling the story as it is, not designing anything. If you're out at the weekend hunting ducks, that's fine. Tell that story if that's relevant to your wine brand. If you are out there pruning vines and you own the property and you're making the wine from that vineyard, and that is of course relevant, then tell that story. If you're not, don't tell that story. Be authentic. I just bought all of these grapes and they're great value and I'm dipping my toe in the water. There are lots of startups and they're making great wine and they're not growing their own grapes and they're just as successful and deserve just as much recognition. We all take different paths in the wine industry. We're all different as producers, hopefully. We're not that is the beautiful thing. I think that's happened in the last decade is we're moving away from reviewers, likes and dislikes, and so we're making wines as producers. We're making wines that we want to make and that our customers want to drink, not what 20 or 30 international reviewers are loving stylistically. Sorry to not really answer your question, but I think that just telling an authentic story, whatever that might be, I have a few people in mind that are complete opposite ends of the spectrum for their approach of their wine businesses, wine production businesses. One has very little experience in the industry and is absolutely, and the style of wine they're making is not particularly to my liking, but they are crushing it out there in the market because their story is great. And if I don't like the wine, that doesn't matter. I'm not buying it. Hundreds of thousands of other people are enjoying it, or thousands of other people are enjoying it and buying it, and that's what's important. And then at the other end of the spectrum, the guy that's making, in my opinion, some of the greatest wines in the Willamette Valley is doing well, but he should be doing better. There's no rhyme or reason to it, but he's also telling a very authentic story. And there are ebbs and flows in the industry. If I could, I was going to ask you at the beginning if you had a crystal ball, because you were going to ask me a question about what the future holds for the wine industry. If I had that, I would use it every single day. There's no rhyme or reason to this. I think hard work, persistence, it's the same thing. Not giving up. Just keep going. Keep your focus, and one day you'll be in the right place at the right time. That's what I tell my producers that are having a tough time. I don't believe in luck, but someone very recently said to me, luck is kind of like being in the right place at the right time. Circumstantial luck, nothing more.
So your role in this is also you're kind of like a guidance counselor too. You're keeping people on the track and giving them support when they're struggling.
I think it's being brutally honest with people. So not giving them the advice they necessarily want to hear. It's authenticity as well, right? What I see in the marketplace, I relay directly. We are very transparent in what we do. If somebody doesn't like, if one person that I show wines to don't like it, it's not a big deal. If I show the wine to 20 people and they're all saying the same thing, it's important that we're not here to sort of boost egos. We're here to sell wine, and we're here to relay the message. I feel like Consoleon, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but it was designed to be a conduit between direct communication between the consumer or the sommelier, the wine buyer, and the producer. So we're kind of an extension to the winery, even though we're employed as contractors. We see ourselves very much as part of their team, part of 12 teams, and there's no ego massaging. we do a good job, great. Let's pat ourselves on the back, move on. If the job isn't getting done satisfactorily, then we need to figure out why. And that could be my fault. It could be delivery logistics. It could be any number of things. It could be winemaking. But yeah, it's figuring out what the problems are and solving them.
So let's talk about you, the producer, then as well. So at some point along the way, you decided you needed another thing to do, and decided to make some wine. So tell me about how that came about.
Yeah, well, I wasn't working evenings anymore. So I was like, why not? Well, so it really came about. I was lucky that my first client at Consoleon was a gentleman by the name of Peter Jacoby. He's now my business partner in one of the wineries that I helped make the wine for. It's called Proteus, and I started working with him in 2015, and he asked me about helping in the cellar at some point, and really sort of we were tasting together. I was helping him put blends together for his wines, and that was going really well. And coming up for the 2016 vintage, we'd worked together for about a year coming up to vintage 2016. And he offered me a space in the corner to really make a little bit of wine, 1 barrel. How hard can it be? And at that point, I was like, yeah, this could be kind of cool, because it's only one barrel. It won't take up too much of my time. I can better understand, and this was what Aerea was really born out of. It's a project to better understand the intricacies of and the business of a small winery in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. That's it. And then the product is honed constantly to offer the purest expression of, in this case, Gamay, and value. I was at a point, I'd done a couple of vintages. As a sommelier, I used to go off to Burgundy, and so I always worked at the same little domain called Domaine Mouzard. They're based in the southern part of the Côte de Beaune, in a little village called Saint-Denis. And I was basically a cellar rat there. I was on very good terms with the brothers who ran the estate. I was buying a lot of wine from them when I worked in Paris, and they ended up becoming like family. So I was afforded a kind of a mentorship in winery operations with them. They were kind of on the cusp. They weren't teeny tiny. They had a few employees working for them in the cellar, and they weren't like a massive corporation. So I saw I saw both sides of that coin in production, and I had a friend in the Adelaide Hills who had just a gorgeous little vineyard and winery called Wisson Lake, and I'd worked for him, Mark Wisson, on a number of occasions when I was based in Adelaide. So I'd had this kind of very romantic view. Like, I would dip in and out of cellars. I thought I knew my way. I knew the difference between a hose and a tank. We all start somewhere. I feel like I'd done, a collectively about a 15-week apprenticeship over the space of 5 years. It was very, it was nothing, a very small amount of time. And so when I started Aerea, the project was more about what I could gain, what kind of an education I could gain on how difficult it was to make fine wine and make a profit from it. And obviously economies of scale were working against me, but we made it happen. The biggest part of and I was well aware of this from day one, but one of our biggest expenses as a small winery is rent, and I didn't have that, so I was already kind of ahead of the curve. But everything else was paid for in cash, and we sourced some bloody delicious fruit from the now Van Duzer corridor, AVA, from a grower down there, who was quite well known for his Gamay. And I enlisted the unpaid help of two amazing winemakers in the valley who have remained friends and have kind of helped me along the way every vintage, text messaging frantically in the middle of vintage. Getting those text message answered within a couple of hours is always really encouraging. So they kind of helped me along my path, and we basically turned out one barrel, and it sold out within 10 days of release after bottling and labeling. And I said, well, I should do this again. Let's not do one barrel, let's do 2 or 3. Right, and it starts to snowball. And I should say that 2016 was wasn't a difficult vintage necessarily. It was an easy vintage for us, but everything was new. And my now business partner Peter at Proteus had some help in the cellar, who bailed pretty quickly when he realised I was there. So I don't think his heart was in it, and then me being there as well just added a little bit of stress to his day, and he threw in the towel, as it were. So I actually made the Proteus wines in 2016 with Peter. Peter was more hands-on than he wanted to be, I think, that vintage. So we kind of muddled through that. Wines were delicious, and we've sold those, and they got a few very good accounts that have now become more important for us, I would say, as we've developed both Consoleon, Aerea as businesses. They've become more and more important. So everything's connected. It's like a web. Yeah.
So with Aerea specifically, why did you choose to go just with Gamay?
It really goes back to that time in Beaujolais. I thought I knew about wine. I thought I understood wine, but I really didn't until that year. Traveling up and down to Beaujolais with Tim, there was like the penny dropped. I said, just you can taste all these amazing bottles of wine and have like zero appreciation for them. I love to taste old, rare, expensive bottles of wine that are classically made, but I also enjoy the business aspect of wine, and business is sales, and the more sales you can make, the more interesting it is for me. So an early drinking wine made sense. I toyed with the idea of Pinot Noir, but because of the situation that I was making the wines in, I really wanted to avoid Pinot if I could. I didn't want to compete directly with Proteus Estate Pinot Noir that I was also making. And the Beaujolais thing made sense to me. There's so many reasons why Gamay is delicious. Most people probably have covered it in interviews. It's refreshing. Look, wine can be made in any number of ways, but Gamay wants to be refreshing. Here in the valley, it doesn't get it doesn't get horribly ripe, so we are not kind of fighting low acid and high alcohol. So it's, for want of a better term, beautifully balanced, naturally quite well balanced. And it doesn't need, you can put some new oak on it if you want, but it doesn't need it. So there you go. There you could basically just save $1,000 on a new barrel if you want. If you don't have a lot of money to spend, you don't have to, and still make pretty darn delicious dry red wine. And the closer you can keep that wine to home, the less expensive it is, and the more greater your profit margins. So that made good sense to me. And seeing that there was a lot of Pinot Noir already being sold locally, it was like, let's cut through that noise and put in. And I think, the same thing can be said for Melon de Bourgogne, that is doing quite well in the valley, and Aligoté, which is kind of getting quite a following, as opposed to Chardonnay. We probably I don't think we find many people in the valley that would argue that Chardonnay is amazing here, but there's fear that it's going to go the same route as Pinot Noir. That not everybody is going to make it to the best level they can.
So early on, you're just still kind of learning winemaking, and now you're making a Gamay for yourself. You're making a Pinot as well. What are you learning? What is it you didn't know that you're learning, and what are the differences between making a Gamay and a Pinot?
Well, there's no doubt about it. As long as you don't design the wine to be anything other than it doesn't want to be already, then the wines are going to taste differently, because we really don't do anything very much different. We use a little bit of whole cluster in both the Gamay and the Pinot Noir. I make a wine for a good friend of mine, a restaurateur in Newburgh who is Italian, and he approached me a couple of years ago to collaborate on a wine that is most definitely manipulated. There's no doubt about it. This thing is made in the a passamento style of wine, which is basically air drying grapes. So it's picking them and storing them for weeks, sometimes months, in cold storage with fans, and it's labor intensive. We need to turn the bunches every day. I'm really not set up for it until this coming year. We're not set up for it in a classical way. Everything is just basically sterilized pick beans. So that is a manipulated wine. Like, it's naturally manipulated. I mean, we're not doing anything apart from setting up a few fans and putting them in the coldest part of the cellar, underneath an air conditioning unit that I have, and then turning them every bunch every day, a ton of grapes, which ends up being just a little over half a ton. We lose just about 50% of our volume on that wine. So to go back to your question, anything that is made, bless you, anything that is made without that kind of manipulation is made in a very similar fashion. So the two white and pink wines that I make, or orange wines that I make, are made in a similar fashion. That's a little bit of skin contact and varying degrees of skin contact, and then settled cold in tanks for overnight in a cold situation, and then barreled down and spontaneously fermented. And I make a Pinot Gris and a white Pinot Noir, and they taste very different. And they're made from two different grape varieties, but they're made in the same cellars with the same, old barrels, and nothing much else. A little bit of filtration if needed, but yeah, not really anything. Like I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm a natural winemaker, because I'll do things if I need to, but it's not like part of the program. I've learned that it's harder to stop yourself doing something as a winemaker than it is, just as it's hard not to grow. Like I said before, one barrel easily becomes 5. It's much harder to say, I'm just going to do 1 barrel of wine. It's very tempting to tweak, to grow, that's our natural instincts as humans, I think. And I'm curious. I have a curious mind, or have a restless mind, and so most of my concentration is on what's happening at that very moment, and then just absorbing that. Not saying, well, now I need to do this to it, or wouldn't it be fun if we tried this? Like that, those conversations I try to have before vintage to plan. So that's what I'm learning. I'm learning patience. I'm learning learning record keeping. I hate paperwork. And I'm forced to do things like that, which is all part of the process, and unromantic but necessary.
I'm curious about the decision-making aspects you're talking about and the preparation aspects. You're still pretty new to winemaking, to production. The confidence, where does the confidence come from to make those kind of decisions, to make those kind of reactions?
Some of it's instinctual, but some of it is reinforced by friends, peers in the industry. We're lucky to have, I'm not entrenched in like council. I'm not like, there's no, like, I'm not part of some kind of like winemaking fraternity here, like some others. But there are a few people that I've considered a good people to bounce ideas off of, and you know, there are many times that the most mundane of situations occur on my fermentations, and I'm still just not 100% confident, so I'll shoot off some, you know, chemical analysis or some photographs or some descriptions of things that are going on to a couple of people who have way more experience than I do, both academically and practically in the wine industry, and they'll be like, you don't need to worry, or yeah, I might want to check back on it in a couple of days, and you might want to do this or that. And this or that might be warming it up, you know, giving it a little pump over. It's not more than that. I make the wines in a way that feels good to best achieve balance. That is it. And balance for me is freshness, savoriness, a toothsome quality to the wine, I like to say. That's maybe a little bit gritty, like sea salt, and that's white and red wines, and I really like that aspect. Somebody tasted my wine yesterday, and they said, yeah, I really like that kind of, you know, that like potassium thing that you get with the whole cluster. And it's exactly right. You know, he broke it down to exactly what is going on there. And we can use fancy words like minerality and, you know, verve and whatever. But at the end of the day, you know, we all use different terms. And I was like, you nailed it, buddy. You absolutely nailed it. There's so much going on in wine. To try to understand it is absolutely enthralling. To actually understand it is frustrating, and I'm kind of the artistic end of the spectrum. I prefer to allow things to just develop on their own and appreciate them for what they are, and but know that they can go wrong. And I kind of like little kids. You just want to like guide them. You know, don't have to always hold them by the hands. You don't have to put them on a leash. But basically, you know, if you see them going to run in the road, like grab their hand and stop them. And it's the same thing with winemaking. We Peter and I say that the winery during vintage and then the barrel room afterwards is like a nursery. You know, it's good if there's nothing bad happening. That's it. Nothing at all. Complete quiet, great. Like, if there's a commotion, that's when you need to start worrying. So all the time there's quiet, we just want to pop our heads in every now and again, give them a little nudge in the right direction, and we're good. Yeah, keep them warm.
You were talking before about your kind of role through Consoleon, the kind of brutal honesty. You're selling this product, but you're also providing feedback. I'm curious how that changes now that you have a product that has your name on it. How does that work for you? Do you feel more compassion and sympathy for people who are making wine? Do you feel how do you handle it for yourself? Who are your sounding boards?
Well, that's another great question, Rich. And yeah, I've come to appreciate the fact that a face for the wine product is really important, and I have encouraged my producers to get out there in the market, even though they have me, and that I'm paid to do that, that it is equally important for them to go out there, because I take orders for my own wines just because I'm present. Often, we'll get into it. It's very difficult. It's a fine line. I'm obviously working for a bunch of producers who trust me to go and sell their wine, and then I'm also selling my wine alongside it, and it's using what can be perceived as an unfair advantage as an advantage to those producers, in that I better understand the intricacies of winemaking, and I can talk more about what they're doing because I've done it myself, and less about, well, don't worry about these wines, this is mine. It goes back to authenticity, and you either trust somebody to go out and sell your wine or you don't. And I always encourage people to think about diversifying their portfolio away from the usual thing, which is, right now, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, if that interests them, because it's easier to sell other wines, because it's easier to cut through noise if you have a different product. So that's one example. I think buyers are more honest with me because they know that I understand production. So I get more honest feedback for my product and my other producers' wines. It's definitely a fine line, and it's something I think about every day, is how I present the Consoleon portfolio.
Is it different getting honest feedback on your own product, and how have you dealt with that?
It's just so I treat my product exactly, when I'm selling it, I treat my product exactly like everybody else's. Yes, I can speak to the production and the ripeness at harvest and all of those other things, and when and how it was bottled, with or without filtration, and marketing decisions for the labels. But at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't like it, people are for the most part kind, even if they don't buy it or they don't like it. We're not dealing with a bunch of meanies out there. Buyers they get a bad rap, but I'm in a luxurious position of choosing who I want to work with as well. So no doubt there are some gruff buyers, and I definitely deal with a few, but certainly not the majority of people I deal with. And I would say that most people are just really curious. It's a double-edged sword as well. We're dealing with the demographics of buyers in Portland in particular is getting younger, more dynamic, but also less experienced, but also more curious. So, we're very lucky that the people that are starting to kind of show up and become the influencers as sommeliers and specialist retailers in the Portland metro area in particular are very thoughtful, and that goes in the way that they deal with their purveyors as well. They're sport for choice, for sure. Let's just leave it at that. They have a lot of choice, way more choice than I had. I used to work with maybe 10 portfolios in San Francisco, maybe a little more, but it wasn't an enormous amount. I've heard people say that they're dealing with 30, 40 purveyors where they're buying one or two SKUs, and that would be kind of with Consoleon. A lot of people that I deal with only buy one or two wines from me, which must be frustrating. It's a lot of logistical stuff you need to contend with. You know, if you've got 30 different orders coming in, it's much easier just to go to a big national distribution company and just buy everything you want from the 5,000 producers that they have in their portfolio. But yeah, good. So that it's like anything. It's an uphill battle, but isn't everything that's worth doing an uphill battle? I mean, that's it. Head down, bum up. Keep going.
Did we cover all the projects? Is there anything else you're working on now that we should be talking about here?
Yeah, no, that's about it. I mean, I've always got a little something. We started a little honey project on the side at Proteus. We've yet to come up with a really good name for it, so I'm selling the honey that's produced on the property as both Proteus and Aerea, and we're just dealing with about a dozen people that are buying it right now, restaurants, and I sell it to a few friends and family. But yeah, that's something that is really interesting. I like to see biodiversity in the vineyard at Proteus. That was farmed. I wouldn't say horribly, but it wasn't in quote unquote regenerative viticulture, and now we're moving every year more and more towards that. It's important steps, and so we have a great apiarist that is based down in Salem, John Rockra, and he placed a few hives on the property. He was amazed at the amount of honey that was produced from those hives, so we're putting more hives, dotting them through the property, and the honey was just going to go back to him. He was going to buy it and blend it with his other properties. And I was like, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. Like, we have both of our neighbours at Proteus are sustainably or organically farmed, and we know that the bees will go collect pollen from a lot further than our 3 estates, basically, but we're pretty confident that we give them as much food as we can on the property. So wildflowers and blackberry bushes are, I mean, we don't always like them, but they when they blossom, it's good for the bees. Mm-hmm. And they're under a bunch of beautiful Montmorency cherry trees that we have on our border of our property and our neighbours. So yeah, that's a new little project that's just started, and it's very, very low investment, and it's an excellent product that's really delicious. I'm excited to be able to offer something from that estate that's not wine. And that's it. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, a bunch of little custom projects. I'm making a little bit of Chardonnay and single barrel Pinot Noir for a restaurant in Portland. Another barrel of Pinot Noir that's always custom made for a great restaurant over in Bend in Central Oregon. And then the Appassimento project, which is called Bandito. It's Aerea Vintners Bandito. And that's my buddy Dario's brand for his restaurant Rosemarino in Newburgh. Lots of little things. It's a web.
So what do you see as you look ahead for yourself? You have a lot of things in the air right now, a lot of kind of newish projects. Yeah. What's happening in the next 10 years? What I would like to happen and what actually will happen, well, we can only guess. But I'd like to continue focusing on building other people's brands. I think Consoleon has a lot to offer. So that's always been exciting for me. It pays my living, and it pays to get other projects started at times, and that's great. And I love to see small family wineries kind of get the recognition and the support that they deserve in the local market. So I think that there wouldn't be much change there. Aerea will grow to probably, we have the capacity to do about 1,000, maybe 1,500 cases tops at Proteus, and so between
RE, the little custom projects that I do for restaurants, and the Proteus brand, we'll see a little bit of an increase in production, but not much. Proteus is very much constrained to the estate. If we buy fruit, then it needs to go under a different label or a different SKU, at least a non-estate wine. So right now everything is estate, and I like that. It's only 3 acres, and we only produce a few hundred cases a year, 3 to 400 cases a year. So we can put in a little bit more vineyard there, but no more than would give us 100 or 200 more cases. It's not an enormous. So we see a small change there. I maybe go back to some stuff in hospitality. We'll see. We'll see where Proteus Estate takes us. But if I could do a little inn or something like that, that would appeal to me. So getting back to my cooking and we'll see. We'll see.
But the plan is to stay in Oregon.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is where you are.
I love it here. Yeah, I suppose I hadn't really thought about that. Certainly no plans to leave. No, I kind of feel like I found home for the first time in many years. I enjoyed living in Paris. I enjoyed living in Adelaide. It's where my parents live, and I have step siblings there. But I feel like Oregon is It's not a surprise to me that over the last few years, the population of Portland in particular and the Willamette Valley has grown. It's a beautiful place, like aesthetically. It's easy and clean for the most part. I mean, every city has its challenges with growth, but I think that Portland has a bright future culinarily. Obviously, the wine industry is now more or less well established, we could say. I think the hard work has been done, and that is getting Willamette Valley recognized on an international level as producing seriously good wine consistently. And by consistently, I mean, over 25 years. So, I don't see myself leaving. Unless I get a job offer to, I don't know where. I can't think of a better place, honestly. Somebody said, "I'll give you a domain in Burgundy." I'd say there's probably someone better to give it to, but yeah, that would be a hard one to pass up, for sure.
I'm curious, before you came to Oregon, what, if any, impression you had of the Oregon wine industry?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar to how I perceive it now. I'd visited a few times, so prior to that, I didn't have any opinion. I had probably tasted a few Pinot Noir and liked them a lot. The classic wines from those first and second, kind of the pioneers, and then that second kind of flow of pioneer producers, definitely thought that the wines that I tasted were perhaps underappreciated, and terrific value. I'm thinking about a bottle in particular that I tasted of David Lett's wines. It was made in the 80s, and thought, just thinking about how small the Willamette Valley is, and the quality of wine that's been produced in it was always like awe-inspiring, and it remains that way. I mean, I think we unfortunately get accustomed, and we settle into routines, and everything becomes familiar and not quite as surprising to us. But when being asked a question like that, it's good to be reminded of how lucky we are here. So, and that's one reason I want to stay. We're extremely lucky.
You talked about your tour of Beaujolais and that kind of aha moment for you. Was it something similar in terms of kind of good product, underappreciated, will be something in the future? Is that kind of your Oregon impression?
Yeah, I probably wasn't living. Definitely, things had gathered pace by the time I decided to move here, at the end of 2014. But yes, it's funny. I think that Oregon natives still say, we're going to be big and famous one day. I'm like, yeah, I think that's already happened, guys. But yeah, I think when you live in the place, you don't see how much it's appreciated outside. And obviously, we're producing a product that, its success is about how far and wide it's spread across the world. So you don't see it, right? You hear about it, but you don't actually, unless you're visiting all these places and you see wines pop up on lists that you're familiar with at the other end of the world. It's hard to appreciate that, especially for people that are not in the industry. But I believe you've already arrived. We've already arrived. I feel like I'm not yet kind of completely entrenched. I feel like I'm working in the industry in a region that has its identity, but I'm perhaps not part of that identity yet. It's just 5-6 years now for me. So yeah, in 20 years from now, maybe I'll be like, sure.
Maybe it'll be we instead of you or they.
Yeah.
I get that.
But it feels good to be here. And yeah.
What do you see as you look ahead for the industry? Obviously, you mentioned your crystal ball that we don't have, unfortunately. Yeah. What do you maybe hope the industry looks like, and maybe what do you fear could happen?
I think I share the same fears as most small producers in the valley, and that is that there could be an overemphasis on the brand Oregon and Willamette Valley. It's a very fine line we have to tread, and with successful brands comes greed, and with greed often arrives big changes that are more focused on the dollar signs than more important things like sustainability and life. Human life and other life. So that scares me. Too many large corporations arriving and snatching up, taking advantage of smaller holdings that are perhaps potentially more profitable than they are currently. So people like Consoleon, and there are a lot of other small brokers that are trying to do the right thing and emphasize how important small the production is, and looking after small teams is really important. And so I think that there's going to be a defense of the small farmer. I hope there's going to be a defense of the small farmer on every level. And in every sort of sector, I should say. So not just grape growing, but the other, wonderful, small hazelnut farmers and other orchards, and even nurseries. I think it's important to see all of those people thrive and not be consumed by large corporations. And a return to a better balance of consuming local. I think we do a pretty good job, but we can always do better. And that goes for everything, again, not just wine, but foods that we consume as well. Instead of bringing in stuff from the other side of the country or outside in other countries, we can probably farm it here and do a better job of supporting that. Our economy is pretty good here, I think, in the state, so we can afford it. We're not strapped.
If someone were to come to you, and this probably has happened, if someone were to come to you and ask for your advice on getting into the Oregon wine industry on some level, what would your words of wisdom be?
Be prepared to work hard. Be prepared to align yourself with like-minded individuals who will help. I think collaboration is really important. Be willing to help others when you can, and be willing to accept the help of others. I think we struggle with that as business owners, and anyone with an entrepreneurial spirit might agree that the hardest thing to do is accepting assistance from others. So I would say those two things, and don't waver from your goal. That would be it, whatever that might be. And there's no right or wrong. There's no silver bullet. Or there is a silver bullet. It's called hard work. My grandfather used to say elbow grease. That's it.
So this was just from my own personal curiosity here, because you have such an interesting range of careers. You have back of house chef, you have front of house, you have sommelier, you have cellar master, making your own wine, selling other people's wine. What do you prefer? What's your favorite part of favorite role that you've had?
So I think it's hard for me to really pinpoint a favorite, because every choice I've made in my career has been right at that time. So when I look back, was I ever unhappy as a chef? No. I was unhappy with other things, but the cooking part of it, no. I adored that. The creativity part. What I would say, I'm most happy doing what I'm doing now, and that's why I'm doing it right now. And that isn't fulfilled in one area. Hence why I have the three different kind of aspects, the three companies. Being able to help somebody else bring their dream to fruition, or as I like to say in the wine industry, not lose a bucket load of money, is really fun. And then using my creativity in producing something, like I suppose I really enjoy watching other people enjoy my work. That's the most rewarding thing. So however I can get that, I'm happy. Whether that's standing table side and serving wine, or pouring a taste of wine behind a bar, or in a cellar, or pulling a sample from a barrel, or making that barrel of wine, or cleaning that barrel. It's all part of the process. Yeah.
That's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything anything I didn't ask that I should have asked? Anything we didn't cover that we should have covered?
No, I think I feel good about that interview.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Rich.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, for sharing all your stories, and your amazing career path so far. And we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Very kind.